Remember the absolute Giga Chad, Sung Jinwoo, the godly MC from Solo Leveling? Ever wondered how OP his son would be? You're in the right place. Sung Suho lost his parents, becoming just an ordinary student with no awakened powers. But everything changes when new monsters appear, and Ragnarok threatens to plunge the Earth into chaos. Old enemies become allies, and a new global threat looms. Can Suho defeat them all, find his parents, and become the strongest Shadow Monarch with incredible necromancy skills? With an even better system and natural talent than his dad, maybe he can. Let's see how the new Shadow Monarch will arise. In this new sequel to Solo Leveling, we dive into the existence of gods. These absolute entities who've been creating countless universes since ancient times. They're known as the Supreme Beings, and their job was to keep creating universes while chasing eternal life. In this endless cycle, they gave birth to tons of substances, like souls and laws of universe. But even with all this creation going on, some of these supreme beings got bored and decided to spice things up by watching their creations fight each other. To them, the chaos and destruction were pretty entertaining. Sure, this meant that their creations had to keep fighting in never-ending wars, dying, and being reborn over and over. But it was all part of the deal to keep the supreme beings amused. However, things took a turn when one of these supreme beings was actually killed by one of his own creations. When the supreme beings from other dimensions found out, they all gathered to observe this world that had lost its master. They were intrigued by the death of a fellow supreme being, especially since it was at the hands of his own creation. While they didn't really care about the death itself, they all shared a single greedy thought. Whoever claims this newly ownerless power first will become its master. The story starts in a high school classroom, where Sung Suho is excitedly bragging to his friends about getting a spot into prestigious Korea National University of Arts. His friends are shocked to hear this, having a hard time believing it. While Suho is laughing and soaking up the moment, one friend starts tearing up because he has to repeat a year, and another friend is flabbergasted, wondering how Suho got into such a top-notch art school with his lousy skills. But Suho's joy takes a dive when he hears a familiar, unpleasant voice offering him a sarcastic congratulations. Well, he's your average school bully, and Suho isn't thrilled to see him again. Instead of using the bully's real name, Suho just addresses him with some random name, which really ticks the bully off. His face twists with anger as he snaps at our boy, letting him know his real name is Yunchul. The bully then brings up that Suho messed up his plans to take over the high school. But my guy shoots back that it's also thanks to him that this low-life bully even managed to graduate in the first place. Meanwhile, the rest of the students are feeling restless to see this bully acting up again. They're really frustrated that Yunchul hasn't changed one bit and is still acting all cocky, even though they are just about to graduate. What's bothering them even more is that Yunchul is trying to bully a poor kid who's lost his parents but still manages to put on a brave face. Finally, the patience of the bully wears thin, and he is about to land a punch over our boy's face. But instead, my guy delivers a knee smash right to the bully's filthy face, then annoyingly tells him to at least try acting like a decent human until graduation. Suho then notices something weird about the redhead and quickly delivers a knee smash right to his face. Even though his knee breaks the bully's nose, the guy, however, remains cocky and nonchalantly claims that it did not even tickle. He then balls up his fist, and it starts burning with a strange energy. With a devilish glint in his eyes, he charges his fist to the max and swings a devastating punch right at Suho's face. Suho barely manages to step back, and the punch hits the nearby lockers instead. The single punch rattles Suho's nerves, and the other students in the classroom are completely bewildered as well. It seems like the redhead himself doesn't even know how he just made a dent in the steel lockers. He's staring at himself in confusion while this strange aura radiates from his body. Even Suho has no idea how to handle this situation. 2 years have passed since that day, and our boy, Sung Suho, is now a second-year university student. As he walks across campus, he notices a commotion nearby. Workers are surrounding a strange portal, and an instructor is telling everyone that all lessons in the main building have been moved to the annex building. The reason? Hunters are going in to deal with the monsters coming through the portal. A guy in a suit asks one of the workers how long the hunters have been inside. The worker replies that it's been just over 8 hours. Since the gate is rated D rank, there's a good chance the hunters will be out soon. While Suho stands quietly, the announcement keeps blaring, and students are talking about whether the school might get destroyed. Some reassure others that the hunters will handle it. It seems that the appearance of a gate isn't that unusual, which is why Suho isn't too freaked out about it. You see, about 3 years ago, these portals called gates started showing up everywhere, and the world went through some major changes. The gates are basically shortcuts to dungeons, and once they are opened, monsters from these dungeons would spill out and start causing trouble. But it wasn't just the monsters that shook things up. People started developing special abilities too. These folks, known as the Awakened, could use mana and had all sorts of cool powers. The world was in chaos, and everyone thought it would last forever. Then, an Awakened named Jinchul came along. He set up the Hunter Association, brought together other Awakened, and created a job called Hunters. Thanks to them, the chaos got sorted out way faster than anyone expected. Now people are split into Awakened and non-Awakened. Since the non-Awakened folks don't have the same perks as the Awakened, they have to work like crazy just to make a name for themselves. Meanwhile, the Awakened can pretty much get whatever they want with their powers. It didn't take long for the non-Awakened, who sometimes feel like they're just ants in comparison, to see their own limits. No matter how hard they work, they can't bridge the gap between themselves and even a lowly E-rank Awakened. Even though Hunters can fight off the monsters from the gates and prevent the world from falling apart, it's clear that without the Awakened, the non-Awakened wouldn't survive. Conversely, the Awakened can manage just fine without the non-Awakened. Because of this, everyone is grateful to the Hunters, and it's thanks to them that non-Awakened people like Suho can live a relatively peaceful life and go about their daily routines. But for Suho, there's also a sense of unease. He feels insecure about himself and wonders if he's becoming too accustomed to not being able to get what he wants. He reflects on the loss of his parents and how his survival depends on others. Even though he once felt he could achieve anything, that confidence has faded, leaving him with a sense of powerlessness. He remembers his mother's voice telling him he resembles his father and wonders how his father would have handled this feeling of helplessness. Suddenly, Suho is jolted by what sounds like his father calling him. When he snaps out of his thoughts, he sees his teacher standing behind him. The teacher compliments Suho on his drawing, which is pretty impressive. Suho just shrugs and says he drew it based on how he felt. But the teacher is intrigued by the creative drawing of an ant that has a human-like stature. To all of us, it's clear what the drawing represents, but Suho has no clue why he ended up drawing such a creepy thing. Meanwhile, outside the campus, Hunters have started emerging from the portal. They all look pretty confident, which is a dead giveaway that their raid was a total success. The site worker gives a shout-out to Hunter Kim for his great work, and Kim replies that everything went smoothly without a hitch. He further mentions they've got some new info for the Hunter Association. Apparently, they came across a new type of monster they'd never seen before. Basically a humanoid creature that spits blue flames from its eyes and mouth and attacks with claws and fangs. He admits that the creature managed to graze his body, but it was nothing serious. Well, it seems like Hunter Kim might have been underestimating things a little, because the wound from that humanoid monster starts reacting badly. He suddenly feels a stinging pain spreading all over his body, making him writhe in agony. His sword drops from his hands, and even the site worker notices something seriously off with Kim. Right on cue, this muscular hunter transforms into a grotesque goblin, spewing the same blue flames. He lunges at the worker, tearing off his chest with a single bite, creating a gruesome mess that sends a chill down everyone's spine. The other hunters and bystanders are horrified. One of the hunters quickly points out that these blue flames are identical to those used by the monsters in the dungeon. Kim, now a horrific creature himself, lunges at his fellow hunter and bites off his head as if it's no big deal. Panic erupts as people start fleeing in all directions, desperately trying to save their lives. Unfortunately, the people bitten by Kim also transform into blue flame monsters and begin attacking others, spreading chaos even further. The screams are so loud they can be heard inside the building, and people quickly gather around the windows, trying to see what's going on. When Suho looks outside, he sees a bloody mess where people are attacking each other, their minds apparently taken over by the same blue energy. It doesn't take long for the students to realize that these people have turned into monsters. Seeing the dungeon break out, the students start panicking and urge their instructor to step up, since he's an Awakened too. But the teacher quickly reminds them that he's only an E-rank hunter. Suddenly, Suho spots the same blue flame monster right above the campus floor. The monster takes its stance, and before it can leap inside through the window where all the students are gathered, Suho shouts for everyone to run away quickly. Before anyone can react, the monster leaps inside through the window and knocks one of the students out immediately, and Suho quickly ducks down to save himself. The monster opens its mouth, spewing blue flames as it starts devouring the student it just took down. The sight is so gruesome that other students are practically crapping their pants. Suho bolts for the exit but then notices a fellow student, injured with busted legs from the monster's crash, and she is unable to move. He freezes at her desperate pleas for help, but after a moment, he closes his eyes and starts running out, reassuring her he'll get the hunters here to help. Deep down, Suho knows he's just lying to her. Leaving her behind means certain death, and he's painfully aware of his own limitations as a non-awakened. But he takes a deep breath, decides not to blame his powerlessness, and tells himself he needs to find something he can do. Suho wonders what his father would have done in this situation. As he imagines his father in his mind, we see that the monster is done chomping down on the student it had taken out. Now, it's eyeing the injured girl on the floor, who's basically lying there, helpless and ready to be slaughtered like a lamb. Tears flow down her face as she takes a final look at the death looming over her. In the next moment, the monster goes wild and sprints toward her like a rabid dog. Just as it's about to take a bite with its filthy face, Suho grabs a fire extinguisher and smashes it into the monster face. And by the look in his eyes, it's like he's figured out what his father would have done, and he's doing exactly just that. Just as Suho's resolve sparks inside him, the system begins to boot up. The first notification is an alert saying he's met all the requirements to complete a secret quest titled Courage of the Weak. Before we dive into what's happening, let's rewind a bit. Suho narrates that he had a dream a long time ago that felt like a game. In the dream, he had to level up and keep fighting monsters that got stronger with each floor. As the monsters became tougher, he had to get stronger too. After tons of challenges, he finally faced the final boss on the highest floor. The boss was super powerful, and Suho felt a mix of envy and awe at its strength. Strangely, he felt a connection to the boss, even though it was his enemy. Later, he realized that the boss was actually his father. As Suho has this realization, he understands that his dream was basically a reflection of his father's life. He was just living out a part of his father's experiences in his dream. He spots the fire extinguisher nearby, grabs it quickly, and rushes back into the room. He lands a solid hit on the monster's face, sending it tumbling backward. Even though he hit the monster right in the face, he doesn't have any mana, so his attack isn't very effective against a magic beast, and he has no idea what to do next. But then, Suho's eyes widen in disbelief as he sees the monster and the terrified girl frozen in place, as if time itself has stopped. Just then, a system window pops up with a notification saying he's met the requirements to complete the secret quest, Courage of the Weak, and is now eligible to become a player. The system asks if he wants to accept. His mind flashes back to his dream, and he realizes that if he can fight this monster like his father did, it's a no-brainer to press the accept button. With that settled, he confirms his choice, and a bright light fills the room as he evolves into an awakened. The next moment, the system announces that he's officially become a player. Notifications start popping up everywhere, highlighting current quests, rewards, and more. We also notice some extra effects from the system, one of which is called longevity. This perk can fight off all diseases, poisons, and status effects, and sleeping will significantly boost his regeneration abilities. Suho's status window appears before his eyes, and seeing this game-like status makes him smile. It's clear that he's finally awakened. His current quest is to defeat the Mistburn, and he'll level up if he succeeds. Once Suho is awakened, time resumes, and he sees clearly that this monster is a D-rank awakened Mistburn. He quickly tells the girl to run away while the monster starts advancing towards him. The two other students who were bitten have also turned into Mistburn monsters. As the monsters lunge at him, Suho's eyes burn bright with determination. He smashes one of them right in the face with the fire extinguisher, but it's clear that a simple hit isn't going to cut it. So he balls up his fist, gathers his energy, and apologizes to the girl before delivering a brutal blow. She flies into the nearby wall and demolishes it on impact. Looks like Suho didn't expect his punch to send the monster flying like that, but he's not complaining. In fact, he's pretty blown away to see he squashed that monster with a single hit. Another monster lunges at him, but Suho responds with a solid kick right into its belly, sending it crashing down. The system announces that the unawakened Mistburner has been defeated, and with that kill, Suho levels up. A new quest pops up, telling him to take down the remaining Mistburners. Soon enough, Suho takes out the other unawakened Mistburners. With all those monsters biting the dust, he's convinced he's finally awakened. He then delivers a devastating punch to an awakened Mistburner. However, this monster doesn't even flinch from the blow, and Suho starts feeling anxious as he realizes this beast might be tougher than he thought. The monster quickly retaliates with its fierce claws, slashing across Suho's chest like it's no big deal. After taking the hit, Suho quickly distances himself by pressing his foot against the monster's chest. As he looks at the fatal wound on his chest, he realizes he's at risk of turning into one of these magic beasts. Right on cue, the system announces a harmful status effect has been detected in his spirit, but it's lifted due to the effects of longevity. At that moment, his injuries start to heal, and he remembers that his longevity skill was activated. The monster lunges at him again, pinning him to the ground. It starts to open its disgusting mouth while Suho struggles to push the beast away. Just when Suho thinks he's about to be overpowered, he remembers the stat points he earned from defeating the other unawakened monsters. He quickly dumps all 3 points into his strength, giving him the boost he needs to push the monster away like a ragdoll. The monster quickly regains its footing but is met with a solid punch to the face from Suho. Even with the extra strength, Suho realizes it's still not enough to take down the monster. The beast keeps slashing at his chest, leaving him no choice but to dump all his remaining points into strength. His fists are soon surrounded by a fiery aura as he delivers a brutal punch that turns the monster's face into a complete mess. It looks like Suho has found the ultimate cheat system in this world. While most awakened have their ranks set upon awakening and can't get stronger, Suho can keep grinding for more points and become indefinitely powerful. Once he turns the monster's chest into smithereens with his relentless punches, he winds up for one last swing, putting every ounce of power into it. That final punch sends the monster crashing into the wall behind it, and the wall crumbles from the impact. The beast is literally torn to bits, like a tattered cloth. With a final push, the monster hits the ground, while Suho is left huffing and puffing after all the action. The system quickly announces that he has defeated the D-rank awakened Mistburn, and also has leveled up several times. Suho collapses to the ground due to exhaustion, and looks at his hand, savoring his hard-earned victory. He clenches his fist with newfound confidence, reminding himself that he's finally become an awakened. A smile spreads across his face as he declares that he's no longer powerless and is now ready to save the people of this world and tackle the crisis head-on. Just as he's pumped up and ready to take on more monsters, another mist beast charges toward the building. With a mighty leap, it comes flying toward the top floor, aiming straight for Suho. The monster, wielding a giant sword, is revealed to be a C-rank awakened Mistburn. Before Suho can react, the beast crashes its sword down, causing a massive explosion that fills the area with dust, smoke, and debris. Meanwhile, the emergency horns are blaring all over the city, announcing the dungeon break at Korea University of Arts and telling everyone to evacuate the area pronto. Back at the campus, more backup has shown up, but the platoon captain is feeling pretty frustrated. People are dying left and right, and all they can do is wait for the Hunter Association to send help. The soldier reports that the association is still trying to find a B-rank or higher hunter to send over, which is why it is taking time. The irritated captain asks, "Wasn't this gate labeled as D-rank from the start? So how come they need a B-rank hunter to clear up the mess?" The soldier explains that the association is factoring in that hunters, including C-rank hunter Kim Jong-soo, have been infected and are attacking the campus. They believe it's better to send a B-rank or higher hunter to handle this situation. Back in the building, Suho watches as the C-rank monster hunter casually strolls toward him. He's losing his mind, thinking about how this giant just leaped from the ground floor to the top floor like it was nothing. This monster is way fiercer and different from the ones he's faced before. Not only is it C-rank, but it's also wielding a massive weapon, leaving our boy unsure if he can handle it. The monster swings its giant sword, and Suho ducks to avoid the blow. The swing is so powerful that it slices through nearby reinforced walls like they're made of paper. Suho isn't exactly thrilled about witnessing such a raw display of power. Meanwhile, the monster grins from ear to ear as he prepares to swing his sword again. Just as he's about to crush Suho with the sword's weight, Suho kicks the fire extinguisher right at the monster's face. The monster slices through it with his sword, and the extinguisher bursts, filling the room with a thick haze. Suho quickly uses the confusion to his advantage and makes a run for it. He figures he'll wait for more hunters to show up and just hold out until help arrives. The monster is still hot on Suho's heels, but then he spots something that makes his grin even wider. Suho is startled to see that the beast has stopped chasing him down, and when he turns around, he sees the beast ogling at the terrified female students who are huddled up on the ceiling, shaking in their boots, waiting for more hunters to arrive. But the monster is not waiting for any hunters to arrive, though. He leaps out of the window with his giant sword aimed at the girls, and Suho can only stand there in horror. With a single brutal swing, the monster obliterates the girls into a gruesome mess of blood. Frustration boils over in Suho, making him clench his jaw. He steels himself with determination, leaps up to the ceiling, and lands a kick right into the monster's back. But his kick turns out to be nothing more than annoyance to the beast, who just swings his sword in response, slicing through the floor in the process. Seeing that rift opening up in the ground, our guy's pretty sure he's in for a rough time. Even one hit could get him killed, and he definitely doesn't want to end up sliced up like those other girls. But he's not about to let this monster go wild, so he dives in head first, throwing punches so fast he's basically a blur. The beast isn't holding back either. It's swinging its sword like a maniac. But my guy is dodging left and right like a ninja on a caffeine high. He keeps up a relentless assault, and after a serious punching session, he lands a knee right in the monster's filthy face. But the monster quickly swings its sword with its other hand, slicing across our guy's belly and making him gush blood. Before he can recover, the monster kicks him hard in the gut, sending him crashing down and making him cough up blood again. It's safe to say he might have all his bones shattered by now, and his rapidly dropping HP makes it painfully obvious that he's in big trouble. But hey, he's still got that one last HP point, as if the system's not ready to let him fall just yet. On the other hand, the beast grins maniacally after seeing his prey struggle like this. Despite his last remaining point of HP, Suho tries to stand, blood dripping from his face. The stakes are high, and the monster charges straight at him. The system announces that his entire body is out of commission, and he starts to collapse from fatigue. With the monster's sword mere inches away from crushing him, it seems like the end is near. But then, the air shatters like fragile glass, and a shadowy figure emerges from the rift. As the monster's sword is about to strike, the dark entity slashes down the monster's hand, saving our guy from his death at the last second. If we have to guess, we can confidently claim that this is Baru coming to the rescue. While Suho's consciousness fades, he catches a glimpse of the monster who just saved him, and it does not take him long to realize that this is the same ant he had always known. Meanwhile, Baru is beating himself up for being late, but he quickly heals our boy, making his injuries fade away, as if he has never been injured. The monster tries to get back up, but Baru growls in frustration, clearly ticked off at the pest that dared to hurt his king. With zero mercy, Baru obliterates the C-rank beast like it's just a watermelon at a shooting range. Then, another monster appears on the ceiling, ready to attack a poor guy holding a broom, tears streaming down his face as he faces his doom. But, not surprisingly, this monster meets the same fate as its friend, getting obliterated into bits and pieces. Baru dispatches all the remaining monsters with his sharp claws, popping them like party balloons. Guts and heads are flying everywhere, and the remaining monsters have no idea where the attacks are coming from. In just a few seconds, the entire campus is cleared of monsters. A bright light ripples through the area as Baru collapses to his knees, finally able to greet his master again. But before we can see their reunion, the scene shifts to the past, where we find our junior Suho drawing ants, and not just one, but he already has several sketches already drawn. Suddenly Baru shows up, and while holding one of the drawings, he asks his young monarch if he's still drawing portraits of someone like him. Baru is absolutely on the brink of tears, overwhelmed by the sight of how much his young master adores him. Then, just as it's all getting emotional, our boy opens his eyes and realizes he's in an infirmary. Apparently, it's not an infirmary but a hospital, and our boy's concerned uncle is laying into him, asking how on earth he ended up in such a mess. He insists that our boy should have a few guards with him because this world is beyond help. It turns out his uncle's worries are justified. By the time Suho opens his eyes, 2 days have passed since the incident. The event has been a hot topic worldwide due to the numerous casualties. What's even more shocking is the discovery of mist burns, the monsters that can infect even hunters and turn them into monsters themselves. The Hunter Association decided not to disclose this to the public, despite the incident happening in the middle of the city. When the hunters arrived at the scene, all the mist-burn monsters in the university had already been chopped up like veggies by an unknown force. Some eyewitnesses even claimed that the monsters just suddenly burst and exploded right before their eyes. Suho turns off the TV, feeling relieved that his awakening wasn't just a dream. On top of that, he's now an awakener who grows stronger as he levels up. But he is still curious about one thing. He clearly remembers that he was cut by a C-rank mist burn, so how is he still alive? Just then, Baru sneaks up and greets the young monarch. But soon, Baru erupts into tears, overwhelmed with emotion after meeting his young master such a long time apart. He's deeply moved to see how his monarch has grown up so wonderfully, and he can't keep his emotions in check. The sight of his old friend brings back a flood of childhood memories for Suho. He vividly recalls how Baru cared for him like a loving parent and raised him pretty well, but he can't understand why he didn't remember Baru until now. As Baru wipes away his tears, he explains that he crossed dimensions to find our boy. Meanwhile, Suho is still trying to wrap his head around why this dark creature was around when he was younger. He also recalls that this ant wasn't always this small before. In response, Baru explains that he shrank because crossing dimensions used up a lot of his mana. The system window labels Baru as level 1 private grade, but the ant quickly gets agitated. He curses the trash system for downgrading him to private grade when he's actually a martial grade. Suho then stretches himself and thanks Baru for saving his life, which makes the ant blush. Baru then reminds him that even though he's tiny now, he's a skilled healer. He then reveals that his main goal for coming here was to release Suho's seal, but he's quite surprised to see that our boy managed to unseal his abilities by himself. Suho then asks if the seal is related to the dream he had. Baru confirms, saying that while Suho might think it was just a dream, everything he experienced was real. He also tells Suho he's much stronger now than when they last fought. He then further explains that the Great Shadow Monarch, Sung Jin-woo, who is our boy's father of course, sealed Suho's powers, and as well as memories to give him a normal life. The mention of his father hits Suho hard. He grabs Baru and demands to know how he's connected to his dad, what he knows about him, and why he was left behind by his father. Baru then stammers out that our boy's father did not leave him behind or anything. He just merely went to outer space. Well, this just makes Suho even more curious, and asks what in the hell does this outer space thing even is? Beru scratches his head, trying to figure out how to explain. Then he uses his shadows to create a few illustrations and says that the great shadow monarch, Sung Jin-woo, went to outer space to fight off invaders trying to take over the world. Basically, Suho's dad is still out there, keeping the world safe. Beru adds that Sung Jin-woo is up against the Atarim, who are known as outer space gods. He goes on to explain that the Atarim are sending their apostles to invade, and before coming to Earth, Beru claims he took down a bunch of enemies himself as well. Not to mention, the gates and monsters showing up on Earth are all the result of this ongoing war. Suho asks if his mom went with his dad, and Beru says no. Suho then reveals that his mom went missing the same day his dad did, so he thought they might be together. Suddenly, Beru starts freaking out, running around frantically. He realizes with a jolt that Miss Hein is missing too, and mutters that the Itarim's apostles must have set a nasty trap for her. Suho then asks if these Atarim bastards are the reason his parents can't come back. Beru asks if Suho wants to meet them. Suho's hand shakes with frustration and determination as he makes it clear he definitely wants to meet them, because he has been alone for so many years already. Beru says there's only one way to make this happen. His dad might be stuck in outer space for a while because of the war, but Suho can find and rescue his mom once he gets stronger. So Beru says it's time to start grinding for some leveling up. As soon as Beru says this, a system window pops up with a quest called the Trial of the Shadow. The system goes on about how Suho is the son of the great Shadow Monarch, but his innate talents are sealed. To unlock that power, he'll need to prove himself by entering the Shadow Dungeon and showing what he's made of. The key Suho is holding is known as the Shadow Dungeon key, and its rarity is unknown. To activate it, he has to stick the key into his shadow. As soon as he pushes the key against his shadow on the wall, a portal pops open. Beru tells him to go ahead and enter, claiming it will help him unlock all the power that's rightfully his. Suho takes a moment to reflect. All this talk about outer space, the war with gods, and the Shadow Monarch feels like a bunch of tall tales right now. But if getting stronger is the only way to meet his parents, he's ready to level up as much as he can. The scene shifts to the past, where we see Suho's dad tells Beru to head to Earth and lift his son's seal because the Atarim's invasion might have influence on Earth as well. He tells Beru to restore Suho's powers and memories and keep Earth safe. And after that, Beru's got the freedom to handle things as he sees fit. Back in the present, Beru makes his final decision and decides to stick around with our boy and keep an eye on his progress. Once they step through the portal, they land on the other side, and Beru explains that this place is the land of the dead, where the living can't enter without permission from the master. This place is called the Shadow Dungeon. Suho's first impression of this place isn't great, as it looks more like a ruined city than a dungeon. But there's something oddly familiar about it. Just then, a system window pops up in front of him, saying the quest is to survive in the Shadow Dungeon. The denizens here won't accept anyone weak as the master of this land, so Suho gotta survive for the next 4 hours to prove his worth, and the timer starts now. Suho is kind of bummed that just staying here for 4 hours is the main goal. But Beru quickly warns him to keep his guard up because things are about to get rough. Well, it seems like the trouble has officially arrived. A monster tries to sneak up on our hero from behind, but Suho quickly delivers a powerful kick right into the monster's guts, and he seems really surprised by the sudden ambush by this monster. The kick seems to hurt quite a lot, but it's not enough to take the goblin down. Suho is intrigued by the sight of the goblin scout, and Beru quickly explains that seeing a scout likely means there are more of these creatures nearby. Hearing this, my guy jumps into action, knowing he needs to handle this critter before he calls his other allies for backup. Beru quickly tells him not to rush in recklessly, but Suho, however, charges anyway. Before the goblin can blow the horn, my guy appears right in front of him, like a reaper coming to collect souls. He slaps the goblin's hand, knocking the axe out of its grip, grabs the weapon, and then smashes the goblin's head with its own axe. Once the goblin's out for good, Suho explains that since the goblin's name tag was just white, which meant the monster was weaker than him, and stronger monsters always have colored name tags. While they're walking around, they spot another goblin who quickly blows the horn. My guy is pretty pissed, realizing he overlooked this scout. Right on cue, a bunch of furious goblins show up, and one even has a yellow name tag. Seeing the horde, Suho is about to crap his pants, and asks Beru if he's going to help. Beru, though it pains him to say it, explains that being so far from the monarch means his mana isn't coming back, so he can't risk losing any strength. Plus, if he jumps into the fight, the experience he'd get would drop a lot, which could ruin the whole dungeon clearing plan. The goblins close in on Suho, charging at him like wild green monsters. But my guy channels his aura, yanks the axe out of the dead goblin's skull, and starts swinging it with such speed and precision that the goblins are getting cut down left and right, like they're being thrown into a blender. Well, it looks like Suho is getting the hang of his undiscovered skills. Controlling things like this makes it seem like he's using an invisible hand, which is quite interesting to say the least. The system window pops up, showing that this skill is called Ruler's Authority, currently at level 1, and it doesn't require any mana to use, and he can physically control objects without touching them. Suddenly, a sneaky goblin tries to take him down with an arrow attack. Suho catches the arrow mid-air, surprised to see an archer-type goblin. Using his Ruler's Authority skill, he quickly makes a makeshift bow and shoots the arrow right back, nailing the goblin in the head with godly precision. Beru watches in fascination, clearly impressed by Suho's adaptability. He remembers that the young monarch's childhood was like the start of a legendary hero's tale. Even back then, Suho could use Ruler's Authority, a power he inherited from his father, but that power was meant to destroy everything, which was more of a hindrance in a peaceful world. But now, with the Itaram apostles invading Earth, Suho has no reason to hold back, and he can shine bright in the battlefields with his destructive skill. As Suho keeps slashing down monsters and racking up levels, he also learns that with his Ruler's Authority, he can only carry up to 10 kilograms. Just as he's thinking about this, a sneaky goblin takes its chance and stabs him in the back. The goblin laughs creepily after the cowardly attack from behind, but Suho quickly shuts it up with a punch that obliterates its teeth and facial features in one devastating blow. As more goblins start to swarm him, Beru can't help but feel a bit scared for his master. That's when one of the highest-ranking goblins shows up, and its colored name tag makes it clear this one is different from the rest. Suho quickly yanks the dagger from his back, losing 30 HP in the process. As soon as the dagger is out, the other goblins pounce on him like hungry hounds. Despite the pain, he swings the dagger and throws it with such godly speed that it pierces through every goblin in the area, nailing the most powerful one right in the center. Suho seems to be loving every second of the fight, feeling more alive than ever. He's attacked again, making his HP drop even more, but he uses his Ruler's Authority to slash down the goblins like they're nothing. As the battle goes on, he keeps piling up bodies, though his reckless fighting style causes his HP to plummet. But he doesn't back down. When he finally reaches the high-level goblin, he starts smashing away, and the system goes wild with notifications popping up everywhere, announcing the levels he's climbing. Once the bloodbath is over, all that's left are bodies scattered around like trash. Our boy finally takes a breather after so much fighting, and it looks like his 4-hour survival mark has ended, signaling the successful completion of the quest. Beru starts clapping for his young master, saying he never doubted him for a second and knew he would breeze through this trial. Another system notification arrives, giving him the choice to accept the reward for completing the quest. Without hesitation, he tells the system to show him what he's getting. The system quickly displays that he will receive a rune stone, which can be used to learn a skill called shadow extraction. Beru is quite excited at the prospect of Suho getting this new skill. Suho checks out his injuries and finds he's actually unharmed. He remembers picking up a new skill called resilience during the fight. It turns out he's been getting skills on top of the leveling system he got when he awakened. Our boy can't help but feel like he's a cheat character with this level-up mechanism and all the free skills he's getting. Beru then reveals that this level-up mechanism is based on the system the monarch used in a past life. It's a support system designed to ensure Suho's safety as he grows. To put it simply, Beru reminds him that he's probably the only hunter in the world born with such an advantage. Suho isn't sure if that's supposed to be a compliment, but he proceeds to accept the rune stone reward anyway. Once he has the stone in hand, he quickly absorbs it as instructed by the system. The system window pops up, showing that shadow extraction doesn't require any mana to use. It pulls mana from a recently deceased body and turns it into a shadow soldier. The failure rate goes up depending on the target's stats and how long they've been dead. Beru explains that this skill turns dead corpses into soldiers, just like himself. Shadow extraction is basically the essence of the authority that created the Shadow Monarch, Lord Sung Jinwoo. Suho's still unsure what this skill really is and wonders if it's some kind of necromancy. He extends his hand toward the dead goblin, and the system tells him he can use shadow extraction on this target. But before using it, he will have to pick a command to activate the skill. At first, Suho thinks it's a bit of a hassle to come up with a command just to use the skill, and while he's mulling it over, Beru suggests commands should always be something direct. So with that in mind, Suho quickly tells the dead goblin to arise. Suho summoned 3 normal rank shadow goblins, but the shadow extraction didn't impress him. Beru explained that freshly extracted monsters were weaker and smaller than when they were alive. Suho noted that the extraction would only last for 1 day, which made Beru depressed as he believed the shadow extraction skill would prove valuable later. Suho reassured Beru and urged him to leave the dungeon, feeling hungry after not eating for 2 days. Beru reminded him that he could use the shadow dungeon key to exit any time, having already passed the quest. Suho readily left the dungeon. Back at the hospital, Suho ate to his heart's content. As he ate, Beru outlined their 3 key responsibilities. First, they needed to protect Earth from the monsters emerging from dungeons, which would naturally boost Suho's level and make Earth safer under his protection. Second, they had to find Lord Hai-In, prompting Suho to ask if they could locate his mother. Beru assured him that they would find the answer while battling monsters. Lastly, the most crucial task was restoring Beru's lost powers, as he despised weakness. Beru explained that as an ant with the ability to consume magic and intelligence, he could regain his strength by absorbing magic from various entities, including a young monarch like Suho. Understanding the gravity of these responsibilities, Suho resolved to enter the dungeon. However, there was a problem. The Hunter Association didn't allow unapproved hunters to enter dungeons, so Suho needed to assess his rank. Given his increased stats after awakening, he wondered what rank he would achieve. Upon testing, a lady informed him that his magic level was 46, making him an E rank awakened. Disappointed, Suho returned, feeling hopeless. Beru explained that Suho had focused on increasing his stats, not his magic level, and the system rank was based on magic level. Despite Beru's words, Suho remained disheartened, doubting how an E rank could save the world, especially since even the Hunter Strike team didn't select E and F rank hunters. However, Beru proposed a plan. The dungeons had specific duties for different grade ranks. The higher rank strike team focused on clearing the dungeon by fighting the monsters, while the collecting team wrapped up the dead bodies. At the very back was the mining team, which gathered resources inside the dungeons. E-rank hunters could apply for the collecting and mining teams. Beru's plan worked, and Suho reached a dungeon full of resources. While working, Suho met his instructor, IM, who was also an awakened E-rank. Suho was thankful for the help getting work inside the dungeon as a resource collector. IM remained silent but suddenly bowed and apologetically told Suho that when monsters broke out in the university classroom, he was the only awakened one who ran out of fear and couldn't help. Suho encouraged him, saying that the Hunter Association had instructed E-rank hunters to run away from monsters, so he had acted accordingly. Hearing this, Instructor IM shouted at Suho, doubting if he had mistaken Suho for someone else fighting a C-rank monster. He started to brag that it would be more shocking to see Suho fighting monsters and surviving. Suddenly, Beru popped out of Suho's shadow, scaring Instructor IM by speaking near his ear about how incredible Suho was. Instructor IM, having never seen such an entity, started to cry in fear. Suho asked Beru why he had come, to which Beru replied that Suho was still weak and needed assistance. Watching them talk, Instructor IM told Suho he was lucky to awaken the powers of a summoner, despite his low rank. Trying to avoid Beru, IM attempted to run away, but Suho jolted him for running once again from a monster, which IM took seriously and became sad. Though it was Suho's first time entering the dungeon, he was curious to see the striking team hunting monsters. Deep down in the dungeon, the dragon team had killed all the monsters and encountered lichens. One striking team member said that the monsters' bodies contained magic stones, so they must keep searching for valuables. Another found a narrow pathway no one had discovered in the dungeon and told the captain to investigate. 3 of them went inside. Although the place was ruined, there seemed to be no monsters, and even the hunters' tracking skills sensed no presence of a monstrous entity. They were confused about how the place got ruined without any monsters. They found a sword pierced into the floor, which looked like high-tier equipment, and all of them wanted to see it because it could be worth a lot. One guy reminded them of traps around high-value weapons, so they must be careful. A hunter named Kim Young didn't listen and pulled the sword, saying a skilled hunter in a C-rank tank could handle any traps. As he pulled the sword, he unknowingly awakened one of the monarchs of the Fangs. When the whole sword was out, it seemed there was no trap. As they approached him, he turned into a humanoid monster, yelling at them for coveting the sword of the Fang monarch, known as the King of Beasts among the 9 monarchs. Rakan ordered the killing of all invaders in the domain of the Fang's monarch and savagely slaughtered the 3 hunters who couldn't face him. Meanwhile, Instructor IM and the other resource collectors were surprised to see Suho summon 3 goblins for resource collection. Instructor IM wondered how Suho could summon 4 entities, including a talking ghost, when most could only summon 2. Suho also found it unusual that he could summon 3 goblins and noted the inconvenience of needing corpses for shadow extraction. He used goblin corpses in the shadow dungeon, where they worked tirelessly. He told Beru that the shadow extraction technique was beneficial. However, Beru dismissed the praise, emphasizing that their goal was to level up, not focus on extraction. Suho mentioned that the Hunter Association's rules required E-rank hunters to avoid entering dungeons alone. He believed there might be errors in the ranking system and planned to reassess once he gained more mana. He also reminded Beru about recovering his lost powers. Hearing this, Beru became excited, and Suho instructed him to devour mana crumbs. When Instructor IM noticed, Suho changed the tone, saying Beru wasn't helpful in mining and should scavenge the crumbs. As Beru tried to feed on a crumb, he sensed a strong monarch's presence. Suho speculated it might be his father. But Beru explained that his father was not the only monarch. Others possessed similar powers. Beru's powers would recover instantly if his father were nearby, but he couldn't identify the approaching beast. Suddenly they heard a striking sound. The laborers became alert, and some asked about the attacking squad. They were shocked to see lichens at the mining site. Everyone panicked and started running, but one person tried to stop the lichens and was slammed away. Suho faced the lichens, giving the laborers time to escape. He noticed their orange names, indicating a higher level like the D-rank mist burns he had fought before. He decided to fight them, but hoped for backup. Instructor IM stayed, and Suho asked him to help if the situation became dangerous. Suho instructed the goblins to protect IM and pulled goblin weapons from his inventory, surprising Instructor IM with his ability to summon weapons. Suho moved with lightning speed, effortlessly vanishing the monstrous creatures and slicing through the steel-fanged lichen like a ripe fruit. As Instructor IM looked on in awe, Suho's powerful presence left him speechless. Facing two lichens attacking simultaneously, Suho skillfully handled the situation. While one lichen clamped down on his weapon, Beru marveled at Suho's mastery of combat using shadow powers as he devoured the fallen monster. Suho reflected on his ability to use extraction and summoning without depleting his mana, realizing the potential to amass an army of the dead by increasing his mana capacity. Deep in thought, he swiftly dispatched one lichen by piercing its skull with his weapon, before swiftly dealing with the other. Then, without hesitation, he summoned them back to life. The remaining goblin looked on sadly, realizing that after Suho will summon another lichen after extraction, he would disappear forever. Instructor IM was astonished at how effectively an E-rank like Suho could control the monsters, but Suho confidently affirmed his status as an E-rank awakened individual. Suddenly, a quest notification appears, instructing Suho to kill an enemy seeking to kill him. Suho initially thinks he has defeated all the lichens, but then he spots a figure approaching them in an attacking team's suit. Instructor IM warns that they are not safe from the lichens, but Suho senses something about the approaching figure and pulls IM behind him. The figure suddenly strikes at IM, missing him but shattering his glasses. Had Suho not intervened, IM would have been annihilated. The ground shatters where the figure's sword lands, revealing its immense power. Suho decides to flee, perplexed by hunters turning into monsters. He notices the figure's red aura, indicating its formidable strength. Flashbacks of his father bravely battling such a monarch flood Suho's mind. He asks Beru if this monarch is like his father. Beru replies that while Rakan has a powerful aura, he is not on the same level as Suho's father. Nevertheless, fighting Rakan would be unwise, given Suho's current level. Despite this, Suho opens his inventory and selects a weapon. Beru is stunned at Suho's determination to fight. Suho explains that the system considers his safety before issuing quests. Thus, if he could defeat the monster, the system would give him the quest. Suho shows his resolve to fight and increase his rank, motivated by the desire to see his parents. With his extracted lichens by his side, Suho steps fearlessly into the domain of the fangs, determined to kill Rakan and grow stronger quickly. Beru is stunned as Suho faces off against the formidable monster, thinking Suho, despite his current weakness, embodies the shadow of a true monarch. He advises Suho that cutting off the monster's arm would sever its connection to the host. Once a mighty hunter, the beast has become even more formidable after infection. Suho initiates the attack, ordering his lichens to engage the monster. They manage to hold it off temporarily, and Suho is impressed by his ability to sustain his extractions as long as he has mana. While the lichens battle the monster, Beru asks if Suho is aware of the other powers of the Shadow Soldiers. Suho is surprised to learn they possess more abilities, but Beru explains that Suho's weak monarch mana prevents him from seeing them. The monster mocks Suho for wielding the Shadow Monarch's power, but Beru is enraged at the insult to his master. The beast is shocked to learn Suho is the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, the biggest rival of the Monarch of Fang. Seizing the moment, Suho throws a spear, which the monster easily breaks. Suho hurls multiple weapons using his authority, but the beast smashes them away. Suho then summons all the hunter's blades in the dungeon and attacks simultaneously. The monster dodges and grows more furious, breaking Suho's sword in a single blow. Realizing close combat is too dangerous, Suho avoids confrontation and keeps his distance, aiming to tire out the monster. The monster taunts Suho, calling him a coward hiding behind the Shadow Monarch's abilities. Suho understands the provocation, but sticks to his plan, dodging attacks and keeping his distance. In a brief moment of reflection, Suho recalls questioning Baru about his true abilities. Baru explained that the restrictions from his childhood were temporary, and that Suho should now consider himself as having regained his former talent. Baru revealed that those dreams about clearing the tower was a test to see if Suho could handle his talent. The enhancements to his body were temporary, but his experiences were valuable. Baru emphasized that Suho's fighting spirit and senses were his true strengths. Suho recalls the powers of his senses and desires a gauntlet. He devises a plan to reshape his extracted shadows into his desired form. Summoning them once more, he is met with the monster's taunts, declaring that no scheme has ever scarred him and warning Suho to give up or face death. As the lichens attack from all sides, the monster skillfully evades them and strikes Suho with his sword. However, Suho's steel-fanged lichen morphs to block the attack. This marks Suho's breakthrough. He can now reshape his extracted shadows, allowing him to form a gauntlet for close combat. He effectively counters the monster's strikes, dominating the fight. Impressed by Suho's ability to use shadow soldiers as weapons with increasing freedom, the monster acknowledges Suho's potential. With his aptitude for the Shadow Authority, Suho, though at the beginning stage, shows extraordinary skills. His increasing aura propels him to deliver powerful blows, eventually landing a crushing punch to the monster's belly. The beast collapses, creating a dust cloud, but rises again, now more enraged. Suho summons all his weapons and wields an axe as the monster, driven mad, attacks recklessly. The monster hits Suho in the back, but the steel lichen protects him. In a swift response, Suho unleashes a series of deadly strikes, ultimately defeating the monster and proving himself as a true prodigy. Standing aside from the core of monsters, Suho embarks on that. Though he got worried about the monster's rank, he never doubted himself to defeat him. Baru also tried to show that he believed in his master, but Suho hushed him. He feels better with his new shadow extraction ability. When he checks his reward, he is surprised to learn a new skill, a Storm Lash, and Rune Stone. It will enable him to strike multiple enemies in one strike. Suho will use the skill professionally, so he tried to test it. He looks for a sword to pursue the skill. The Fang Monarch is humiliated, even at the defeat of his host. The thought that he couldn't bear is that he could accept losing to the Shadow Monarch's descendant, Suho. However, the battle will persist until human greed will. Here, we come to know how Rakan hosts humans. The moment Suho tries to pick up his sword, his curse devours the whole body of the person grabbing it. But Suho picks it up. A blue aura dominates the red one. A system notification prompts that he has obtained an item, Fang of Rakan. Suho liked the sword as an excellent tool to test his skill. But the Fang Monarch is out of his mind because he, the inheritor of the Fang Monarch, couldn't take over him. Suho had the blessings of excellent spellcaster Candiaru, and with the longevity effect, he is immune to all status effects. Suho tests his Storm/Slash skill with the Fang of Rakan. It shatters stones even far away into pieces. Baru observes him and says that he is reacting differently from the moment he saw Shadow Extraction. The Shadow Authority is thousands of times more incredible than such skill. Listening to this, he feels sad. Meanwhile, Instructor IM becomes conscious but freaks out when he sees the core of strikers before him. Suho said explaining things would take a while, so he shouldn't freak out. Outside the dungeon, there's a lot of activity and noise. Suho, with a serious demeanor, has already rescued several people and is now heading back in to look for any remaining survivors. Instructor IM is puzzled by how vital Suho is, considering he's an E rank with summoning skills, which are usually considered insignificant. However, Suho's actions speak otherwise as he saves multiple workers and ventures back into the dungeon. Once inside, he encounters many wolf monsters and dispatches them with his Shadow Extract concealment ability, which helps him level up. He then stands atop the pile of defeated monsters, while Baru mentions that it's suitable for her experience to increase by killing more of them. Suho notices something strange. The power of his sword suddenly weakens. The sword reveals that it can only work with the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, making Suho realize the significance of the Fang of Rakan. The vengeful spirit of Rakan resides within the sword, and Baru comments on the dubious nature of being more assertive when dealing with someone weaker. The sword defends its ability, suggesting that one always goes after something more substantial in hunting. But the truth remains that Suho is weaker than the sword's host. Despite his efforts, he is defeated. Suho is surprised to hear the sword speak but proceeds into Rakan's domain. There, he finds the bodies of the strikers, and the sword explains that it has killed every intruder as part of its duty to protect the sanctuary of the Fang Monarch. The system notifies him that he can also use shadow extraction in the human corpse. Baru told him as long as it was a corpse, he could turn any of them into his soldier. Suho thinks of it as a great idea, but eventually gives up and carries them away. Upon inquiry by Baru, he told them that if they have to fight for him even after death, then it's punishing them. He asked Baru if the sanctuary they were in was of monarchs. Then he asked about his father killing that monarch if it's related to Itarims. Baru briefs him that Itarism is the current enemy of the monarch. There were 9 monarchs, including his liege, the great Sung Jinwoo, and Ashbourne's successor. He is the current shadow monarch and king of the dead. The Rakan, the monarch of fangs and king of beasts. Quaratia, monarch of plagues and queen of insects. Tarnak is the monarch of the iron body and king of monstrous humanoids. Baran, monarch of white flames and king of demons. Ligia, monarch of the beginning and king of giants. Silid, aka Frost Monarch, monarch of frost and king of snowfolk. Yogamont, monarch of transfiguration and king of demonic specters. The Antares, monarch of destruction and king of dragons. The transcendent strength possessed by all 9 monarchs was beyond contemplation. Baru continues to tell him that when 8 of the monarchs invaded Earth, they all died at the hands of his lord. Suho was amazed to know his father killed them all. The sword also said that the Shadow Monarch is his lord's enemy who killed his master, the Fang Monarch. He dares Suho that if he had all of his strength intact, he couldn't wait to kill the descendant of the Shadow Monarch. Suho shares his viewpoint that his father killed the other monarch to protect Earth, and the Rakan is also trying to protect its place from the invaders. So both sides are right from their point of view. But the difference lies in the taking vengeance from the descendant. He further said that if Rakan must protect this place, it wouldn't be foolish to be hostile towards his father, whom the Fang Monarch couldn't defeat. But the sword doesn't seem to understand that. Suho comes straight to the point and proposes a deal to help him, so he will help him protect this place from the Itarims. The Shadow and the Fang fighting on the same battlefront do feel odd, but Suho proposes an excellent deal to him. Outside the dungeon, we see a group of people sitting with Instructor IM for the details of the incident happening at the dungeon. He starts to tell about what happened. He thought for a second that people would treat him better when they saw the results Suho received, even though he is an E rank. Therefore, this would be an excellent opportunity for him to repay his debt. That evening, an article got uploaded onto the internet, and an E rank hunter fearlessly ventured into a dungeon alone to save the higher rank strikers. There are more headlines about the many testimonies of whom he had saved by a hero residing within an E rank. One guy keenly observed the articles and planned to get more porters to cover more details. Black Tortoise Guild, in the second department, Lee Young-ho, feels Suho is an exciting candidate for his guild. He sent his profile of him to his workers, and they were even astonished by his news of clearing the dungeon all alone. He orders his workers to try to contact Suho immediately. After a while, Lee Young-ho asked if Hunter Sung Suho had replied. In his opinion, a beginner like him should have been very happy to receive an invitation from their big guild. But as it turned out, he had declined. Lee Young-ho had a look of shock on his face. He couldn't believe that an E-rank hunter could decline an invitation from a guild as large and powerful as theirs. He asked to double-check if it was a mistake. But no, it was true. Besides, it looked like Sung Suho wasn't planning to join at all. Lee Young-ho couldn't believe that the man who was doing the job of a hunter wasn't going to join a guild. Did he really think he was the S-rank elite? But according to his assistant, all was not lost. After all, clearing the dungeons alone wasn't just difficult, it was almost impossible. He was sure that after some time, he would come to them himself. In the meantime, Suho continued to reject endless offers from guilds. Once he returned from the dungeon, the messages didn't stop coming. In Beru's opinion, many people needed his strength. However, the reality was different. The guilds only offered Suho a job as a collector or a porter. The reason why he wasn't going to join a guild was because it would prevent him from advancing. Joining would mean slowing down his progress. In short, it was useless. Since he was finally done with all those annoying messages, Suho decided to have a conversation with Fang of Rakan. Back in the dungeon, he told Fang of Rakan that the Fang and Shadow aligned with each other. In Fang of Rakan's opinion, it sounded like some nonsense, and he was even surprised that Suho was talking about it so easily. However, there was still a possibility that they would become allies instead of enemies in the future. Fang of Rakan also had a condition. He wanted our hero to take him to another sanctuary of the Fang Monarch. Suho continued his conversation at home and asked Fang if he knew how to get there. He replied that when it came to the Fang Monarch's sanctuary, he could find out its location no matter how far away it was. Now he felt that the gate that led to the shrine had already disappeared. In his opinion, it was because of what people called the dungeon rupture. In simple terms, this place had become a field-type dungeon. That was the name of the dungeon where the abandoned gate had been breached, causing the monsters to break out. Now that everything was clear, Suho had no intention of delaying any longer. After sending his uncle a message asking him not to worry about him, he set off. After a while, he arrived at the protected area. After receiving confirmation from Fang of Rakan that this was indeed the right place, Suho noticed a sign. It said that only members of the Hyena Guild were allowed to enter. It looked like this place was now run by the Hunters Guild. This was a problem, because trespassing on private property was punishable by law. It was also the property of the Hyena Guild itself, which was mostly made up of criminals. Beru immediately disliked the idea. In his opinion, they shouldn't listen to Fang of Rakan, and should rather focus on leveling up. However, Suho seemed to think otherwise. When asked by Beru about what he was up to, our boy replied with anticipation in his voice that he was preparing to enter there. Even the Hyenas Guild wasn't a problem. After all, if they didn't have proof, they would never know who the culprit was. Beru couldn't help but notice that Suho was very reminiscent of his father with his reckless actions. After successfully sneaking into the territory, Suho wondered if the field-type dungeon was always so foggy. Nanny Beru began to explain that the fog was the magical power of outer space. It breaks through dimensional wall, causing ruptures in the worlds. This fog is the reason the sacred ground Fang of Rakan was on broke through the dimension and got linked to Earth. It was as if the otherworldly beings were about to send their army to Earth through a huge hole in the dimension. After all, the more magical power involved, the more it affects movement in space. Simply put, for someone strong to appear, Suho needed to wait. This was time he did not intend to waste. He intended to fully spend the time waiting to level up. Thanks to the local monsters, he had everything he needed to do so. His opponents were Daggerclaw Vriga and Black Shadow Rajan. Their names were orange-colored, which meant Suho would be able to have some fun. In addition, it looked like Fang of Rakan had no intention of staying on the sidelines and wanted to show his strength. To Suho, his words sounded promising. However, he didn't intend to use sword as his main weapon, as he had already figured out how he would fight. And to begin with, Suho planned to use the basic attacks used in the tutorials. Then he would accelerate those attacks with the ruler's power ability. Next, Suho used different weapons to be unpredictable. And finally, the Storm Slash skill left monsters no chance at all. But even that wasn't all. Get more equipment using shadow extraction. That was his new and strongest way of fighting. Beru couldn't find the words to express his admiration for our boy. Fang of Rakan remained silent, but he had something to think about. He had just been able to see the power that Suho had managed to inherit from the Shadow Monarch. The more opponents he had, and the longer the battle dragged on, the stronger he became as he picked up the Fallen. In a battle like this, no one had a chance of defeating him. After a while, Suho was facing his new undead army. Thanks to his level up, his intelligence level had also risen. Now the number of summoned creatures had increased to 5. But according to Beru, this was still negligible compared to the old monarch. After a while, Suho managed to get to the right place. At the place where the gate leading to the sanctuary should have been, there was a base. Even at this late hour, there were many people there. Suho thought it was strange, because the best time to fight monsters was during the day. Suddenly, a car came to the base and everything became clear. Our hero was shocked by what he saw. Bound and battered people started coming out of the car, who had clearly not been brought here voluntarily. The members of the Hyenas Guild were really scum. Suho found it hard to believe that such terrible things could still happen in the civilized world. Realizing how this scene might make our hero feel, Beru advised him not to get into a fight. After all, if they were caught trespassing on private property, his status as a hunter would be in danger. But as it turned out, Suho no longer heard him. He rushed towards the bandits without a second thought. Beru could understand his feelings. Suho's father was a police officer, and his grandfather was a legendary firefighter who had saved hundreds of lives. Suho had grown up under their influence since childhood, and now he just couldn't stay away when he saw injustice. Sensing something, the man turned around to check it out. And the first thing he saw was our boy's leg. It was time for justice to be served. His blatant act first, think later approach managed to stop the Hyena Guild member from approaching the bound lady with ill intentions. Sung Suho's feet were planted deeply into the face of the perv, leaving a shoe print on the bastard's cheek. Beru, the sword, and the other supporting cast were left hiding in the foliage while the young monarch wreaked havoc. The bastards of the Hyena Guild were caught off guard. They were not expecting any intrusion into their operation, and now there's a young man going sicko mode on them. Suho's initial strike was supremely effective. The momentum of his fist was top-notch, knocking the perv down to the ground, eating dirt and gravel. The young monarch slowly turned his head to assess the situation. His gaze was as cold as ice. Then came the realization that he had just blown his cover, effectively leaving himself exposed in the middle of a privately owned territory controlled by brutal criminals. His act first, think later approach only works if you have the power to back it up. These hyena bastards could easily turn the story against him, as illegal trespass on another guild's territory is a massive crime. Thankfully, he was quick enough to come up with a simple answer that would get him out of hot water against the law and retaliation. Manipulating some of his shadows, he transformed them into a mask that would effectively hide his identity. With his identity protected, Suho questioned the Hyena Guild for their blatant practice of kidnapping and endangering people. But the hyena punks didn't budge against his questioning. They returned the question instead. As if it wasn't enough to trespass, this masked man was openly attacking them too. One of the officers ordered his men to attack the intruder, to destroy and tear him limb from limb using blade and magic. With Suho's inherent skill and growing experience, he had no trouble evading the rough technique of a hoodlum. Moreover, he did his research against this hyena guild. Their average member rank is only D rank. Seeing that these people are bottom dwellers, Suho decided to tone his strength down to prevent any accidental deaths. But even with his suppressed level of strength, he had enough power to blast an enemy away with a well-timed counter. The impact was so forceful that it also took the man along the first victim's path. It was a 2-for-1 deal. Suho did not stop there. He took to the air to dropkick 2 bastards up front. This absolutely mad lad performed a split in midair, taking out 2 punks at once. Beru watched from the sidelines, impressed with how well the young monarch was moving. He could see that Suho had grown stronger. Those that humans call D-rank awakeners can no longer cause him any trouble. Seeing this incredible pace of improvement deeply moved the shadow ant. Suho, on the other hand, felt that dispatching these enemies came a little too easily. At level 16, he primarily focused all his attribute points on strength while keeping the other ones evenly balanced. After dealing with the criminals in this crooked hyena guild, Suho promptly tied them up together. It was a little villain sleepover. As Suho dusted his hands from all the manual bondage work, Beru praised his clean execution. The kidnapped survivors also came up to Suho to thank him for setting them free from the guild's clutches. When asked if he was a hunter from the Hunter Association, he gave them a roundabout answer. He then told the survivors to escape to a safe place while he cleaned up the area. Luckily, they still had the vehicle used to send them inside the private compound. Suho wondered just why the Hyena Guild was kidnapping folks. Suddenly, the Sword started reacting with their primary goal, which is why they snuck into this place in the first place. They could feel it concealed within the lawless facility of the Hyena Guild. After walking around for a moment, the party reached a structure that looked like a massive warehouse from the outside. Upon seeing what was inside, Suho's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Inside were signs of horrific practices. It looked like a kennel or an inhumane prison, something straight out of a nightmare scenario. Looking to the side, there were remnants of medical paraphernalia. It looked a lot like they were imprisoning people in here and doing God knows what to them. The empty cages with loose chains showed the grim experiences of the people who were held here before. In the midst of all the bad vibes, Beru started sensing a vague energy that was pretty thin but familiar nonetheless. This feeling led them to a cage where a whimpering furry animal was cowering in fear. The poor guy was full of apparent signs of experimentation and unethical medical procedures. Suho looked at the imprisoned animal and became even more confused as to what the Hyena Guild was trying to do. The Sword interjected, correcting Suho that what was in front of them was not a dog. That young wolf behind bars was a descendant of the King of Beasts, the Fang Monarch. It turns out that after being defeated by the Shadow Monarch in war, the King of Beasts assigned a guard to escort his remaining descendants to safety. The king believed that another Fang Monarch would emerge from his bloodline one day. If the loyal Sword was being honest, they weren't even hoping for the birth of another Fang Monarch. They just wished for the descendants of their king to live on. Suho gently carried the puppy away from the enclosure. Beru could sense the vague energy of the Fang Monarch on the little pup. Its vitality had declined so much that if left alone, death would come. Whatever the young monarch wanted to do, Beru would roll with it. The next step was entirely up to Suho. Before they could come up with an answer, a heavy presence of oppression coated the atmosphere. The smell of bloodlust entered the warehouse as the silhouette of a beast headed inside. A gruff and playful voice noted the missing guards in the vicinity. He was expecting a group of intruders, but the culprit was just one guy. Suho hurriedly summoned his mask back up. But upon catching a glimpse of the surprise guest, his blood ran cold. The owner of the gruff voice speaking in perfect human tongue wasn't a human. It was a literal hyena monster. This beast scorned the Hyena Guild for being so useless, as expected of humans. The Sword recognized this guy as Brocky. They were somehow connected back in the day. This lunatic was supposed to be the guard assigned to protect the descendants of the Fang Monarch. Brocky also recognized Rakan's fang in blade form. Rakan's fang floated forward. He interrogated Brocky for behaving like a lunatic when he was supposed to be the protector of the king's bloodline. Just what was the guardian doing for the last puppy to end up in such a miserable state of pain and neglect? Brocky seemed offended by the questioning of his job, and you don't want to see Brocky offended. Within a fraction of a second, he closed the distance between him and Suho. The beast even extended its sharp claws to touch and inspect the human just to intimidate. Brocky claimed that Suho was touching a pup that belonged to him. Overwhelmed by the tension and the monster's speed, Suho tried to lock in. The savage hyena was charging in again. This time he looked a lot more unhinged. Blocking the incoming attack might not be so simple. Still, with a massive speed disadvantage, Suho's reflexes were only fast enough to get a hastily put-together guard block. The initial contact did not hit any vital parts, but the momentum sent him flying into concrete walls, crumbling any unfortunate structures on the way into dust. His crash was so severe and apparent that Baru started panicking for the young monarch's well-being. Zooming out of the perimeter, you could see that a single attack from that hyena produced a wreck of Avengers-level destruction. Baru managed to find the young monarch under the rubble, and he was oddly fine. He was just a little shaken by the attack that hurt the most out of all the times he's been hit recently. He says that, but his head was bleeding quite heavily. He could hear some ringing inside his head too. Sustaining heavy damage was rewarded by the system though. It leveled up his endurance skill, increasing physical resistance from 20% to 40%. Baru shared that he's been sensing vague remnants of familiar energy in the area since earlier. Now he's realizing that he's picking up the signs of Iterim in this compound. More specifically, in that beast called Brocky. Hearing that the mysterious Iterim is somehow involved, this just became personal for Suho. Brocky was already in the process of retrieving the dying pup, still with the creepy look on his ugly face. Rakan's Fang tried to make sense of what Brocky was doing, but the beast really was just batshit crazy. Then Brocky explained that there's a reason why he's been able to maintain his high level of strength after losing his sanctuary. He simply chose to shift his perspective that life is all about the survival of the fittest. The fate of the weak is up to the whims of the strong. That's why it's natural for the weak puppies to sustain the strong. This brat they're calling the descendant of the Fang Monarch was nothing but the best source of nutrition around for someone like Brocky. If presented with the tastiest dish imaginable, you would eat it too. In Brocky's case, he's been regularly consuming the puppy's blood, extracting the Fang Monarch's essence through the bloodlines. Hearing this treasonous monster explain his crimes made Rakan's Fang furious, wanting to kill Brocky if it was the last thing he'd do. But the hyena just laughed at his outrage. Brocky asserted that Rakan died simply due to the fact that he was weak. As for himself, he has survived for so long because he's one of the strongest people. Just as he was proclaiming to be the only fitting candidate to be the next Fang Monarch, a sneak attack loosened his grip on the puppy. Brocky reacted fast. His reflexes were out of this world, his bloodlust even more so. But Baru was even faster in retrieving the weak wolf pup. He even snickered at the enemy's pathetic speed. After securing the pup, Baru got out of there in one quick movement. Suho then called the Fang of Rakan to his hand as he faced the real boss of the Hyena Guild. His synchronicity with the blade was a sight to behold. The hostage was safe. It was time to go all out. It's a good thing that the Fang was pissed to death with Brocky. They could use that anger to settle some business with the beast. With a common enemy, they could finally show the world the first alliance between Shadow and Fang. Iterim better pay attention. This Brocky fellow represented Suho's first clue regarding the mystery of his father. This battle-tested savage beast trusted by the Fang Monarch wouldn't give up that clue so easily, for sure. As Brocky's anger flared up with a murderous scream, one of his eyes lit up with a golden sigil. At the same time, Suho received the emergency quest to hunt the hyena. He must take down Brocky and reach safety. Baru, stuck babysitting on the sidelines, was almost driven to tears as he couldn't do much but watch the fight from a safe distance to protect the pup. Speaking of the pup, all the chaotic sounds of fighting must have woken him up. Even the simple process of slowly opening his eyes made the puppy struggle. The sight he saw was the young monarch's back standing proud against Brocky. Shadow and Fang casually dusted the damage sustained earlier, standing in front of the beast for the actual fight. Suho fixed his eyes on the hyena. He even tied a bandana on his forehead to look dope as hell. At least now it's clear where the Hyena Guild got their name, those uncreative bastards. But how did a monster make a guild that kidnaps people? Could it have something to do with Iterim? As Brocky exited the warehouse, he saw the Hyena Guild members tied up neatly. They were respectfully pleading for Mr. Brocky to set them free, the fear apparent in their voices. The goon up front warned Brocky that Suho was not an average guy, and that they needed to work together against this unknown enemy. Hearing this imminent increase in troublesome enemies, Suho was prepared to charge in and stop that team from happening. He drew his blade fast, but the beast opened its jaw and showed its fangs even faster. Its target wasn't the young monarch, but his own guild members. In one swift motion of a brutal bite, Brocky made the heads of his men lunch in one chomp. Blood spurted all over the place as the disembodied heads moved to the monster's stomach. Suho was flabbergasted, stunned even. He was not expecting to see such a severe case of friendly fire. Brocky explained that he did not need a bunch of humans telling him that he needed help. Those who don't know their place are immediately executed. That's his law. Seeing just how ruthless this monster was, Suho knew that such evil could not be left to roam the world free. Braki must answer his sins under the blade. Unfortunately, Suho's blade and the raw power behind it were not quite enough to pierce through the monstrous hyena's hands. He gritted his teeth and drove the pressure down even harder, but it did not show any signs of budging. He was angry, extremely so. This bastard viewed humans like filth to the point of daring to kill multiple people without batting an eye. Braki just repeated that the right to live as a weakling is determined by those who hold power. With this reasoning, he could practically do whatever he wanted. He's so deep in his delusion that he would take everything he wanted. With one claw strike, he sent Suho flying to the steel containers once again. This time, the young monarch was prepared to bounce back after just a few moments. Against an enemy as experienced as Braki, letting his guard down for even just a moment could spell life or death. Thankfully, he was able to dodge the follow-up bite that went on to make a crater on the ground. Braki was so fast that it almost felt like fighting two enemies at once. 1 minute he was on your right, the next he was already targeting your left. Impressively, Suho was managing the head-to-head battle of pure animalistic instincts quite well. Braki was not a typical opponent though. Every move he made had the profound weight of destruction. While executing the complex moves of a hungry beast, he looked like he was making a mockery of his prey, with that insulting grimace permanently etched on his face. Then came the claw attack so powerful that it sliced the air and every structure that happened to be on the way. Braki noticed that his over-the-top attack did not quite land on the target though. He tried to look around and regain clarity, but the young monarch had already enacted his plan to go from the monster's blind spot to the sky. From up above, he utilized his downward force to increase the velocity of the storm slash, pushing it to the limit to wound the troublesome hyena. Sure, he managed to make the beast bleed in multiple places, but the cuts were too shallow, failing to deal significant damage. Braki laughed, teasing the Fang of Raycon for being such a disappointingly dull relic of the Fang monarch. Carelessly running his mouth without paying attention to the enemy opened Braki to a painful stab in the back. Suho pretty much turned the tables completely at this point, but he was not finished yet. While lodged deep in the monster's flesh, he ordered the Fang of Raycon to spin and carve a way out of the monster's body. The Fang spun out, still thinking why the loyal Braki would change so drastically like this. This crazed dog, filled with hate and greed, used to respect and pledge his allegiance to Lord Raycon. What made him transform into something so unsightly is still a mystery. If you directly asked Braki, he would answer that he used to respect Raycon. But there's a particular group of entities that made his perception change. They're known by their golden sigil. That same golden sigil was etched into Braki's left eye. With his principles being put into question, the monster's brain must have been plunged into turmoil, leading to an even more aggressive series of attacks. He swiped his claws with full motion, seemingly trying to shut down anyone in his path. Braki's tone eventually devolved into an even crazier cadence. He claimed that he never respected the king of beasts. He merely had no choice but to yield in front of Raycon's strength. But now that he's awake, he won't go back to the life of a weakling, forced to kneel to higher powers. Demonstrating his resolve, Braki broke Raycon's fang by force, shattering most of its blade into 1,000 little pieces. Suho made the grave mistake of trying to move towards a fallen comrade while the enemy was still in the vicinity. Braki made him pay for this blunder. Fighting something as brutal as the hyena, Suho couldn't afford to worry about others. He should just focus on his own survival. The hyena's punch was a one-way ticket to untold agony. The damage made it feel like his bones were getting crushed. Any ordinary guy would have passed out and given in to the pain. But when Suho thought of his dad fighting literal gods by himself, he couldn't help but feel pumped. While Sung Jinwoo was busy with the bigger picture, his son couldn't fall into the hands of an insignificant monster. Suho called the power of shadows to coat his fists, bending the impressive power into the form of a gauntlet. A punch with this glove, he nearly rocked the hyena away by sheer force. Suho knew that this was one of those moments when he had to stand tall. Beru continued watching with the tense fear of the young monarch falling in battle, but it looked like he was keeping up with Braki's intensity. To the side, Raycon's fang now looked like a sad piece of scrap equipment discarded on the ground. From the broken blade, the power of the Fang monarch started seeping away. Perhaps this was the end of the once illustrious family. The survival of the successor and the future of the Fang. Are they really leaving this all in the hands of Sung Suho? The Fang refused to go down so pathetically. He wanted to fight. He then saw the last descendant of the Fang monarch, a small puppy with horrific wounds, trying to stand up on his own. This was the successor of Lord Raycon. The blood of a monarch was not letting this proud beast go down without a fight. The sword finally realized what needed to be done all along. On the main field, Suho was still slugging it out with the hyena monster. He was at a disadvantage when it came to size, power, and everything else. But having his shadow armament was keeping him in contention. The sword and the descendant watched as a single human fought for their sakes. They couldn't help but feel inspired by Suho's fighting spirit. Rakan's Fang could now remember the last helpful thing he could do in such a poor and dying condition. He could just give his remaining power to the bloodline's successor, healing its past injuries and strengthening its small frame. The heir took in the power of Rakan's will smoothly, growing in size at an unreal pace. Back in the field, Brocky was still darting all around the place. He was equally accurate and unpredictable. Suho, even with his rapidly improving battle sense, could not come up with a better answer than blocking. After being depleted of his energy from the non-stop exchanges, Suho could barely keep his head upright from exhaustion. He felt the frustration of weakness seeping into his bones. With his remaining 21 HP, he would undoubtedly die if Brocky even grazed him with another heavy-duty attack. But the young monarch still managed to stand up, raising his fists to square up. He thought he was stronger than this. Brocky increased the spiritual pressure, praising Suho for being better than a regular human pest. But the time for playing was done, and Brocky wanted blood. Lunging in with his devious grin, his fangs aimed at Suho's head. Still reeling from his injuries that brought his HP to kill range, Suho couldn't possibly evade or block the incoming sharp attack. As he was cursing his luck, another entity literally jumped into the fray. It looked like a wolf wrapped with a golden aura. It had jaws and fangs strong enough to pierce through Brocky's tough fur and skin, stopping the animal's attack. Suho was supposed to go down miserably, but this unknown beast just came in, clutched to save him at the last minute. Brocky lifted his head, the golden sigil in his eye glowing brighter at the sight of the wolf. That bite wound looked nasty. Pools of dark blood flowing out of multiple wounds made it quite painful for the crazy hyena. After inflicting a troublesome injury on Brocky, the golden wolf with a mark on its forehead landed beside Suho. The look of rage in the wolf's eyes when it looks at the hyena is thick and bloody. Suho's system informed him that the successor of the Fang had shown respect for his fighting spirit. As a result, the successor was now formally requesting to be a part of his party. This means that Baby Wolf somehow turned into a full-grown beast while he was fighting against Brocky. The direct descendant of the Fang monarch wanted to form an alliance with him. Brocky was surprised that Rakan's heir was able to absorb mana from Rakan's Fang. Suho was also surprised by the sword's action and his sacrifice. He sacrificed himself to save the heir and give him strength in battle. Rakan's heir was still waiting to see what Suho would decide and whether he would accept him as an ally. But there was no reason for him to worry. Our hero had planned to work together with Fang from the very beginning, so there was no difference. Suho accepted the offer and pressed the yes button. Now he was successfully recruited successor of the Fang as his ally. Suddenly things didn't go according to plan and Suho's mind was flooded with memories. They belonged to the heir of Rakan. It was the first days after they lost the war to the Shadow Monarch. Then he had been left alone with Brocky, who had not yet become crazy. That Brocky believed that in the end, this world was about survival of the fittest, and they as those who defeat will lose much. But for the prosperity of the Fang, Rakan's heir must become stronger. Brocky protected and cared for the little wolf as best he could, until one day when everything changed abruptly. The little wolf was beaten and scared to death. They came, the Ataram messengers. Brocky tried to protect Rakan's heir, but was defeated and forced to kneel. Defeated and humiliated, he asked only one question. Why hadn't they finished him off yet? The main figure among all these figures was the child, and it was because Brocky seemed to be useful to him that he was still alive. This strange child chose him, and the woman brought the glowing stone to his eyes. As soon as the stone touched his eye, Brocky experienced indescribable pain and his scream filled the cave. The little wolf wanted to help him, but there was nothing he could do. Now the hyena Brocky had new masters, and they gave him a new mission. From then on, he had to capture humans alive and bring them to his new masters. The thing that the child planted in Brocky's brain would increase his power and help him accomplish his mission. Though the ultimate effect of this power was up to the user, he was curious to see the result. Rakan's heir wept at the sight of the torment his protector had to endure. But even he realized that Brocky was no longer the same as before. The power given by the child twisted Brocky's desires, and he became a power-hungry, bloodthirsty monster. He remained that way until he met Suho. Coming to his senses after the flashback, our hero realized that he had seen the memories of Fang's heir. He was most interested in the bastards who had planted something in Brocky's eye. Perhaps they are the ones who are connected to Itarim, and are carrying out his dirty plans in this world. Then it appears that Fang's heir is not trying to take revenge on Brocky, but to save his friend who has gone mad. If Brocky's mission is so closely tied to these bastards' plans, then Suho must defeat him right here and now to put an end to it all. There was only one small problem. Suho didn't have the power to do that right now. Luckily, there was a notification from the system about a new quest, thanks to the recruitment of the ally. The quest was called Monarch's Heirs, and to complete it, our hero needed to find all 8 heirs of the monarchs and recruit them as allies. As a bonus, thanks to the alliance with the Fang heir, Suho and the little wolf gained bond skill. Their combined power was simply explosive, and literally so. Braki was blinded. Baru, too, was barely holding on, and couldn't believe that the young monarch was experiencing something completely different from what the old monarch had faced. Braki wasn't sure what it really was either, but he wasn't going to just stand by and let Suho do what he was going to do. With all his might, he lunged forward, and he put all the power he had into that punch. The blow hit its target, and the shockwave kicked up all the dust in the neighborhood. There was silence, and the dust began to dissipate. Suho was more alive than ever, and now easily held the distraught hyena by the arm. Despite Braki's attempts, the bond skill was successfully applied. When combining the power with Fang's heir, Suho became much stronger. Thanks to this bond skill, our hero gained the power of the beast. Using this skill consumed 1 unit of mana every second. This skill can be combined with the skill successor of the Fang to become even stronger and get a sense of the beast. Braki was surprised that the successor was consumed, but was not going to retreat. However, his chance to win was already gone. Suho easily dodged all of his attacks. He felt his body light and felt that his senses had become sharper. This allowed him to dodge with the slightest movements, and to clearly sense the moment when he could deliver one precise, devastating blow. The blow was so powerful that Braki was lost in what was happening. He simply couldn't believe that it was the same kid as before. However, even so, with the power bestowed by those strange figures, he was sure he couldn't lose. If he lost, he would be deprived of everything. Fueled by rage, he rushed forward again, but Suho easily blocked his blow. Even Baru was surprised that the young monarch's mana had increased so quickly. Braki didn't care about any of that. He didn't know what schemes our hero was cooking up, but he couldn't afford to lose to the human. He was sure that in the end, the difference in strength was determined by the difference in species. So he felt despair at the weakness of his opponent's flesh. Their counterblows met, and the force from the impact was incredible. But in the end, Braki was wrong. His flesh and fist was weaker and was thrown aside, whereas Suho remained steadfast and even gained a new skill, martial arts. This is a passive skill that does not consume mana and allows the awakened to become more skilled at martial arts. Also, the damage dealt by bare hands is increased by 33%. Beru was furious that some pathetic dog dared to talk about species differences in front of the young monarch. There is no species higher than a shadow monarch who is a top apex predator. Braki was shocked to hear this. It meant that this child was the son of the shadow monarch he hated so much and wanted revenge. But that was not destined to happen. Suho's foot strike had sealed him so deeply into the ground that all thoughts of revenge were gone. The ground around him could not withstand the impact either. Finally, silence fell over the forest. Suho deactivated the bond skill, returning to his normal appearance. Fang's heir immediately separated from him. Even the dying Braki was captivated by his obsession to become stronger and repeated it over and over again. He had to become stronger. Rakan's heir approached him and only whimpered softly. Braki was dying, and it only a couple of seconds before he died that the stone planted in his eye began to dissipate, and he finally remembered. He remembered the reason he wanted to get stronger so badly, all to protect Rakan's heir, and now he was angry at himself for not being able to do so. With a parting howl, the little wolf gave his old friend a goodbye, and Suho got the notification that the hyena Braki had been defeated, thanks to which he raised the level twice. And the rest of the story you will see very soon. The main thing, do not forget to put a like below the video and subscribe to the channel.